Okay. So sorry for the slight delay. If I can get everyone's attention, we will get this show on the road. Wow. Annual Conference is WACSSO's key event which guides the direction of the organisation and serves as the platform for future policy development. The official constitutional functions include the implementation of new policy, determination of priority issues and action for the next 12 months. The task of putting policy and resolutions of Annual Conference into action becomes the responsibility of your elected state councillors. The unofficial, but no less important functions include informing and empowering affiliates through the participation at state level of delegates and demonstrating to the Government, the Department of Education and other education-based organisations the level of interest and commitment of parents and school organisations. An active contribution is required to ensure that everybody at conference, and those that you all represent, is given a full opportunity to participate. Your participation is required to ensure that conference is an effective forum for debate for all government school organisations from throughout the state. Prepare yourself for debate sessions and discussions. Use the briefing sessions to clarify any points and questions that you may have. Seek guidance and read the conference material. Be familiar with the rules of debate and standing orders for Annual Conference. Another important part of participating in Annual Conference is learning from the conference atmosphere, such as informal discussions throughout the weekend and at the networking sundowner, which is always a bit of a treat. Meeting socially helps develop a greater feel for the P&C and school organisation movement on a statewide level. I would like to acknowledge the student performance during registration this morning by the Westminster Junior Primary Year 3 Recorder Group. What a fantastic way to begin our conference, and I would ask delegates to put their hands together and thank them. They're all at the back of the room. So thank you to all of the staff and students and parents for coming out on your weekend. We really do appreciate it. And we've had a very small change to our running this morning, and we're very fortunate. Unfortunately, Jeremy is running late, so if Jeremy Garlett is still able to attend, if you can bear with us, and we will do the traditional welcome to land when Jeremy arrives. But we're very fortunate to have Olivia and Aaliyah here with us this morning from Westminster, and these young ladies have very graciously offered to do a welcome to land for us, as I'm well informed that they do a fantastic job of it at their school. So if I could ask Olivia and Aaliyah to come forward. Now, I don't know how we'll go. What we might do is put 2 chairs up so that you can each reach the microphone. Would you be comfortable standing on the chair, or I wonder if we can I bend these? Yes? Oh, there we go, they come down. I hope you can see these lovely young ladies. So when you're ready, you just go for it. So,
you ready? Steady, go. I respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting, the Noongar people. It is a privilege to be standing on Noongar country.
Thank you very much. So thank you again to the Westminster School for coming along this morning. Good morning. My name is Collier and I am honoured to be the 27th President of the Western Australian Council of State School Organisations, and it is my enormous pleasure to preside over the 2012 Annual Conference. It's great to be back at this wonderful venue, seeing so many familiar faces and meeting first-time delegates. On behalf of the councillors and staff, I extend a warm welcome as you come together from all corners of this great state to represent your respective associations. Your attendance here this weekend is testament to your enthusiasm and commitment to public education and to ensuring that every child in Western Australia has access to a quality education. You are the purpose behind WACSSO. Our organisation exists to provide a high quality level of support and to represent the collective voices of school organisations. On behalf of State Council, I thank you all for the dedication and service that you provide within your own schools and the wider community. the public education system would not be what it is today without the voice of parents influencing governments of all persuasions to ensure that their focus is on providing every child in WA with a high-quality educational opportunity. I would like to acknowledge our invited guests, the Honourable Peter Collier, MLC, Minister for Education, Energy and Indigenous Affairs, Ms Sharon O'Neill, Director-General of Education, and Sharon will be with us on Sunday, Mr Paul Papalia, CSC, MLA, Shadow Minister for Education, Ms Alison Zamon, Greens Spokesperson for Education, Ms Betty Green, Mr David Forrester and Mr Robert Fry, WACSSO Life members, Ms Anne Gisborne, the President of the State School Teachers Union of Western Australia, Mr Brian Lindbergh, representing the Board of the Western Australian College of Teaching, Mr Stephen Breen, President of the WA Primary Principals Association, Ms Anna Prosper, President of the WA School Canteen Association, the Honourable Brian Ellis, MLC, Member for the Agricultural Region and Chairperson of the Rural and Remote Education Advisory Council, Ms Ricky Hendon from the Community and Public Sector Union, Ms Joanne Hirsch from the Isolated Children Parents Association, Mr Bruno Folletti, School Drug Education and Road Aware, and Mr Stanley Jairaj from Youth Care. If you could please all make our guests welcome. Thank you. Delegates, invited guests, observers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to your 78th Annual Conference of the WA Council of State School Organisations. We would like to begin by acknowledging the tragic passing of one of our P&C presidents, Abby George Kennedy. Abby was the heart and soul of Goolalal Primary School and spent many years taking on various roles across the school, including volunteer canteen manageress, school photographer, elected school council member and the position of P&C president over many years. Abby was a tireless, selfless worker for the school and will be sadly missed. And I do acknowledge Donna Savini, I hope you've got your name right, who is present from Goolalal this weekend. The State Council is directed through broad representation by approximately 670 affiliated P&C associations, which your presence here this weekend represents. It remains vitally important that directions and policy formations are representative and provide State Council with a solid foundation on which to base our activities for the year ahead. This year's theme, Public Education, Promoting Equity, Pursuing Excellence. The Federal Review of Funding has highlighted the widening achievement gap in education, which deepens the inequity in society, and it concluded that the current funding model is responsible for that gap in inequity. The WACSSO policy states the premise that social justice in education will be achieved to the degree that there are no significant differences in educational outcomes arising from ethnicity, socio-economic status, race, sex, physical ability, geographic location, or any other variable irrelevant to the educational achievement. But we know that the playing field is not always level, and those affected are our most precious resource, our children. What costs can be placed on education? How do you tell a child that there is no money for their school, for their class, or for them to aspire to be all that they can be? And how do you tell a family that the school their child goes to simply doesn't have the money to provide the educational opportunities that that child deserves? It was indeed a happy coincidence to see that the Department of Education's strategic plan for 2012 to 2015 has the title of Excellence and Equity, the basis of strong public education system for every student. But with a budget which is continually being squeezed, while the department is constantly being asked to deliver more from less, how does government realistically expect that equity can exist in our public schools? The time is right for change, to level the playing field and get a fairer deal that makes Western Australia the state of equality. WACSSO continues to deliver quality training programs and strives to make these services more accessible to P&C associations. We're constantly seeking improved ways of delivering information to affiliates which supports them in achieving their aims and objectives. We are looking at ways to utilise digital technology to maximise access to training and develop specialised training programs for office bearers. We're also looking towards e-publications as a way of ensuring you have up-to-date information at your fingertips. WACSSO strives to be a driving force in educational policy development. The executive team has set a clear direction in creating new synergies and networks with key stakeholders to ensure that parents are continually and genuinely valued as key partners in the education field. State councillors are involved in representing the voice of parents and carers on a variety of committees. They influence decisions made by government agencies and community organisations to ensure they are in the best interests of students attending our public schools. WACSSO state councillors and staff have been involved in and provided parent representation on a broad range of committees, working parties and workshops over the last year, and these are all listed in your conference guide and up on the screen. As always, WACSSO has endeavoured to improve its contact with the public and stakeholders by actively engaging with the media and becoming increasingly involved in social mediums such as Facebook and Twitter. Some may think it's a good thing, others may disagree. The new and greatly improved website was launched earlier this year, and we were overwhelmed with the positive response from affiliates. The PNC Voice and WACSSO e-News remain the core of our regular publications. Both serve as ways of summarising current education initiatives and changes, as well as publicising important information and dates. The readership is wide and not just limited to parents, but whole school communities, including teaching and administration staff. Affiliates can also get information from the WACSSO staff and state councillors. And state councillors are often the first point of contact for many parents new to their role within PNC and keen to find a source of assistance. At various points throughout their involvement with PNCs and WACSSOs, parents look for introductory and explanatory information, encouragement and supportive role models. I suggest that you take every opportunity over this weekend especially to engage with your state councillors, as they are more than eager to help. Conference is also a wonderful opportunity to showcase the great work being done at grassroots level by enthusiastic members of school communities across Western Australia. We always enjoy receiving your good news stories, and we're thrilled to be able to showcase the often incredible contribution parents and carers make at their schools, in such a variety of ways too. You should all be proud of the efforts involved, and I hope, like me, you are inspired by this snapshot of what has been achieved by some of our PNCs over the last year. I also note that one of our sponsors saw the significant importance of the work parents and citizens do in our schools, and as such have been the sponsor of the Good News Story segment with the PNC Voice for over the past 4 years. We will be drawing the winners at the end of proceedings tomorrow, and I would like to thank PhotoWorks, School Portraits WA for their continued sponsorship of the Good News Stories, and I look forward to their ongoing support that they give to PNCs and WACSSO. Their sponsorship is greatly appreciated. Adros Primary School. A creative essay writing task transformed teaching at Adros Primary School. It led first to establishing a water-wise garden and then to an extensive native tree growing program. Their students started growing 1,500 trees from seed in the first year, 2,000 in the second year, and are now aiming for growing 4,000 native plants. Some of these plants are planted around the school where they replaced lawn and other introduced species. However, the majority are donated to nearby reserves and parks. Adros Primary School has developed relationships with farmers and water catchment groups in the Wheatbelt area, assisting them by growing trees for them and later planting these trees. The extensive environmental work at our school is heavily supported by the PNC, which not only provides volunteer labour, but also ongoing funding required for seeds, pots and soil, etc. Vass Primary School. The Vass Primary School PNC has built a small art exhibition into a regional attraction for the southwest. The Vass Art Awards attract over 200 entrants from some of Australia's most prominent artists, with all funds raised going to the local Vass Primary School community. They have managed to raise over $100,000 in the past 5 years for the PNC committee to provide extra resources for the primary school. In 2014, the Vass Art Award will be celebrating its 10th anniversary. The Wollaston Primary School PNC, in conjunction with the local car racing club, Wally Boys Racing, held a fundraising event on the Wollaston Primary School Oval. Wally Boys Racing, that was a mouthful, donated all the car entrant money to the school and the sponsorship money they collected prior to the event, minus the cost of the advertising, posters and trophies. The PNC organised all of the refreshments for the day and staffed the stalls. A garage sale with quality items donated by Wollaston Primary School staff and families was also run. The participation and the sense of community was amazing. It was excellent to see everyone working so well together and having fun. The combined event raised $7,000. There are many other PNCs out there also doing a fantastic job. Please put your hands together and congratulate them all. We look forward to continuing stories over the next 12 months. Don't be afraid to celebrate your achievements, as it may inspire others to greatness, and you really should be proud of all of your accomplishments. Certificates of Merit. These are awarded by WACSSO to members for lengthy and meritorious service with a minimum of 10 years. The certificates are awarded on behalf of an affiliated P&C association or district council. It is my pleasure to recognise the following 10 people from P&Cs throughout the state who were recognised throughout 2011. Liz Bott, Manglanut Primary School. Natalie Carter, Kensington Primary School. Lana Dulwood, Leeming Primary School. Catherine Dixon, Warnbro Primary School. Michelle Harrison, East Waikiki Primary School. Debbie King, Clarkson Community High School. Terry Murray, Rollystone Community College. Ian Mortimer, Narrabeen District High School. Edward Somerville, Canning Vale Primary School. And Angela Zirich, Cecil Andrews Senior High School. Let's give a round of applause for the recipients who received their Certificate of Merit. I'm sure there are many others out there who have given 10 years or more of distinguished service, and I would encourage P&Cs to nominate them to WACSSO for formal recognition. I take great pleasure in reading letters of request, noting the significant contribution of the nominees over the years, and have made many of them have continued to do so. It's now time to introduce your wonderful staff and counsellors. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our dedicated staff who work continuously in supporting this organisation through a range of affiliate services to you all, and have been the drivers of bringing this conference together over the weekend. Miss Jodie Quinn, Affiliate Services Officer, or we could start with Miss Winnie Dyson, I'm flexible, Winnie Dyson, Trading and Development Officer. Maybe you'll do the slide and then I'll say. Karen Izzard, Finance and Administration Officer. Jodie Quinn, Affiliate Services Officer. And Chris Doherty, our Communications and Research Officer. And they really are the four most wonderful people to work with. We're also very fortunate to have a pool of 4 casual staff that help out as and when required, and I note the attendance of Christine Catchpole, who is a delegate in the room today somewhere. And Christine's one of our casuals. It's now my pleasure to introduce the councillors that collectively represent you at State Council and bring the collective views of the education districts back to one forum to ensure the real views of parents in public schools are being represented. Canning North, Miss Jackie Wharton. Canning South, Mr Ken Walker. Esperance, Mrs Dale Roney. Fremantle Central, Joel Schreiber. Fremantle South, Chantel Sands. From the Goldfields, a familiar face, Mr Esmond Delaney, previously from Albany. Mr Warren Daniel, Joondalup North. Mrs Sandy Nichols, Midlands East. Miss Lynn Meredith, Peel North. But first, Sheila Robinson from Peel Central. Apologies, Sheila. Lynn Meredith, Peel North. With Miss Janet. Bev McGee, Perth North. Ruth Thatcher, Perth South. Catherine Connell from the Pilbara. Michelle Drieberg, Swan West. Diane Bennett from the Warren Blackwood West District. Mrs Janet Pettigrew, Senior Vice President, currently Vice President from the Perth Central area. S.O. Delaney from Goldfields still. Gets a double mention because there's never enough SO to go around. And Mr Paul Owens, who's currently our Acting Senior Vice President. If you could please... and me. Yay! Here I am. There are currently 15 vacant electorates, and if you believe you can give time to representing an electorate, bringing educational issues to WACSSO and supporting P&Cs, please approach one of the councillors or staff and find out some more about what is involved in being a councillor. It's not always an easy role, but personally it is very rewarding for those that put the time and energy into it. This conference offers an array of inspiring speakers and guests, and State Council recognises that this is your conference, and we are hoping this being our 78th will be one of the best that we have ever presented for you. I hope you have an enjoyable and productive conference, and I look forward to working with you to ensure the best opportunities are considered for our children in public schools. It is now my pleasure to invite to the stage the Honourable Peter Collier, Minister for Energy, Education and Indigenous Affairs. This is Minister Collier's first as WACSSO Conference as Minister, but of course he's certainly no stranger to WACSSO, and we've met previously with Peter when he was the Shadow Minister. We look forward to continuing our established relationship with him as position, and in my opinion, and I'm sure it is also the opinion of delegates to this conference, education is such an important portfolio, and we're sure this is reflected in his continued dedication to this vital portfolio. Please join me in welcoming Minister Collier to the 2012 Annual Conference.
Thank you very much, Kylie. As always, very effervescent, energetic and knowledgeable. It's great to be around Kylie again. She's always a great advocate for parent body and for education in Western Australia. To Brian Ellis, my parliamentary colleague, to Alison Zamon, my parliamentary colleague, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here, I really am. It's the first time, Kylie's correct, that I've addressed you in my capacity as Minister for Education, and it's a role that I absolutely love. I really do. I'm a product of the public education system from Kalgoorlie. I taught in the public education system, also taught in a private girls' school and a private boys' school. I love education. It is without a doubt the most significant issue within our community. It always has been and it will continue to be. So what we've got to do is to make sure we get it right. And the role that you'll play and the representation that you have through WACSSO is very, very significant in ensuring that we do get it right, particularly in our wonderful public education system. Now, education has undergone a number of changes, particularly over the last decade and beyond, in a very generic sense in terms of assessment, in terms of curriculum, and also in terms of infrastructure and funding for both the public and private education system. Never more profoundly than it does at the moment with regard to Gonski and what will emanate from the recommendations from Gonski from the federal government, which will be forthcoming in the next, I'm very sure, in the next week or so. Having said that, those issues, as I said, are very generic in nature, and they permeate right through each and every one of those sectors. In the public education system, of course, we have some issues that are probably more specific to the public education throughout Western Australia. With 771 public schools and 270,000 students, 35,000 staff, including 22,000 teachers, we have to get it right. We've simply got to get it right. We have a magnificent public education system in Western Australia, and what we've got to do is to continue to improve on the foundations of this magnificent system, and that's what we intend to do. So what I'll do, how long have I got, Kylie? I can talk to a paper bag, mate, so you tell me. Oh, okay, cheers. Worth it? Oh, really? I actually, it's a novel thing I actually saw on the way here today, and I had a look at my briefing notes, and it's got questions in there that actually have been provided for me, which is... We can do them at the end if you like. Yeah. Take note, Alison. Anyway, sorry, Alison's colleague, so you're well aware in the upper house and always does the right thing in that area. Can I just say, what I'll deal with is there are a few of probably the more profound issues that exist in our public education system at the moment. My view on where we've gone in particularly the last three and a half or 4 years now, and where we're going in the future. And I can't cover everything, I'm sure you're very, very aware of that, but I'll deal with the issues that I feel are most significant in your eyes as parents and representative bodies through WACSSO. Without a doubt, the independent public school system has been a great success in our public education system. It is a magnificent policy, it really is. It is doing exactly what it should do, and that is empowering local communities to have a say in what goes on within their particular area or within their particular cohort or their particular school region. The silo approach to education in terms of making sure that we do deal with individual schools on an individual basis is not anything new. It's not new. Although we have had very much a top-down approach in terms of decision-making with regard to education. That is, the department has fundamentally made decisions for each individual school. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as they get it right. Now, one of the biggest issues, of course, that's happened with education is that over the last 15 years or so, parent bodies in particular, but the community as a whole and industry have wanted to have more say in terms of what goes on in our school. Now, they have had that say fundamentally in our private education system for a number of years, so they do feel they've had that say. And they do feel they've had that say also in the public education system through such bodies as the Parents and Citizens Associations that you represent, etc., but not in sufficient quality or quantity. And it's very, very important that we do empower groups such as your own, but also the community as a whole, to have a say in what goes on within your individual school. And that's very important to me as a former educator. As having experienced both systems, I was very, very cognizant when I took over as Shadow Education Minister that we did want to make sure that we did, if we were fortunate enough to get to government, get to a situation where schools did have much more of a say in terms of what went on within their individual school environment. Now, I announced another 48 schools about a month ago that will have an independent public school status. And that brings to a total of 255 now in Western Australia, or around a third of our public schools. And I would like to get to a situation as Education Minister where I felt that all schools had more autonomy in terms of the decision-making process within their environment. That is, that they did have a say in terms of staffing, yes, within regard to staffing, with regard to behaviour management strategies, with regard to curriculum, with regard to an input from the local community, to empower local communities to have a say, to ensure that that community is very much a part of the local school community. You always have been, but it's going to be even more enhanced. And that's what the independent public school system is all about. The independent public school system is literally about empowering local communities to have a say within your school community, even more so than ever before. Now, it does come with it its problems. And I acknowledge that, and those problems have been articulated by, and quite legitimately, by a number of people over the last 12 months or so with the rollout. And where do we go from here? Where do we move forward? Because quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, there are some schools that are always going to struggle to take on the full gambit of an independent public school. They may not have the facilities, they may not have the resources, they may not have the expertise in the parent body, they simply may not have the capacity to be a full independent public school. And those schools should never ever be diminished in terms of the role that they play for providing a wonderful education system for the students within those environments. I'm very, very aware of that, and I can assure you I'm doing something about it. I never want to get to a situation where we have a two-tiered system of education. There were those Philistines out there for years that have said there is a two-tiered system in our education system between private and public. Well, those people haven't been into our public schools. They don't understand the energy, the expertise, the experience that takes place in our public schools on a day-to-day basis. There's not a two-tiered system in terms of the private and public system in Western Australia. Our public education system is world-class, and it will continue to go from strength to strength. Having said that, I do not want to get to a situation where you say, well, if you are non-IPS or you're not an IPS school, somehow you are diminished in significance, or you are diminished in terms of the role that you play in providing a quality education for our students. So can I say to you, we will continue to roll out the independent public school system, but at the same time, I will be announcing, certainly toward the end of this year, a system whereby we are acknowledging the issues that may exist or be created as a result of the independent public school system to ensure that every single school is catered for in this, within this policy shift. That every single school is provided with more autonomy, that every single school is provided with avenues for resources, but also for expertise and support. And as I said, we've gone past the point where you have a top-down approach. We will have a bottom-up approach where all schools feel they are part of the decision-making process, and that will be rolled out in a much more expansive fashion toward the end of this year. So yes, I do acknowledge the fact that there's a potential for a two-tiered system to be created. I can assure you that is very, very firm in my mind that that will not occur. Having said that, I'm I'm delighted with the response I've had from the independent public schools in terms of the influence or the impact that it's had in terms of their decision making, their impacts in the community. I'm yet to find anyone that has come to me that has said that they're not working or in fact that they don't like the policy. Those that are involved or embraced with the independent public school system are very, very supportive. So I hope that has to a degree placated some of your concerns and some of those, as I said, those legitimate concerns that exist. I'm very conscious of it, and I can assure you we're doing something about it to ensure that it doesn't occur. Another issue that's brought to my mind, and something that I was very supportive of, and I'm sure is you are very aware of, is the transition from Year 7s to secondary schooling. It's a very good policy shift. It is a very good educational policy shift. By 2015, 90% of all Australia students will have Year 7 in their secondary schooling. A number of reasons responsible for my enthusiasm for 7s into the secondary stream. It has occurred very successfully, dare I say it, in a number of private schools, a number of Catholic education schools, and also in some public schools in terms of the shift from 7s to the secondary level. With the changing of the school leaving age, a number of our Year 7s are that 6 months older in Year 7. But that is not the motivational force in terms of saying, let's make sure that we do provide the best educational outcomes, and one of the ways to do that is to move 7s into the secondary stream. Particularly with regard to the national curriculum, and as the national curriculum is rolled out, we've got to get to a point where we do provide that specialist education for students in Year 7, that we do provide a specialist subject matter teachers for Year 7 students, and that is best provided in the secondary environment. The primary education system will always provide the foundation skills for our students, but the specialist teaching, the specialist learning, the specialist curriculum is best enhanced at the secondary level, and that's where the Year 7s will move, and they'll take advantage of those specialist teachers and their specialist curriculum. Now, there will be some issues, particularly with regard to schools in some areas of the regions, in the rural and particularly the remote areas. And again, I very much appreciate the concerns that you may have with this regard. Now, the state government has allocated over $250 million for infrastructure spend with regard to ensuring that we do assist schools in the transition, but that is not going to necessarily placate schools in the regions who feel that it is going to have a direct impact on school communities. Can I just say to you, to give you a bit of solace, that no school will close as a result of the fact that students will be moving to Year 7. Now, in some instances, small schools do face the prospect of actually closing or amalgamating or annexing with host schools. That has always been a thing of the past, always. And in some instances, it enhances student learning because, of course, it does provide more opportunities in the learning space to be in a larger school environment, and that will continue to occur. But in terms of closing schools as a direct result of the transition from 7s to secondary level, that won't occur. We will continue to monitor it in the regions. We'll continue to provide support. There will be a transitional phase with district directors, and district directors will be able to make a conscious value decision with regard to whether or not there will be a transition for some particular students. But we'll continue to work with schools in the regions to make sure that it is as seamless as possible. So I very much appreciate the issues that we have there. In terms of moving on to another area, in terms of assessment, in terms of quality education, we, as I say, and I say this quite sincerely, we have a magnificent education system in Western Australia. There is always this notion of comparative analysis and comparative value judgments. Those in the printed media salivate at the prospect of having league tables. They salivate at the prospect of comparing one school with another. They salivate at the prospect of comparing one state with another to determine whether or not that is an indication of success or failure of that educational system. And, you know, it is naive in the extreme to assume that those comparisons can be made and any value can be put on those comparisons. That's why I'm at pains to say to the West and to say to the Sunday Times, you are causing such a disservice to education by listing schools from 1 through 10.
You know what they used to do once upon a time, and this is not so far back, I've got to say, this is only less than a decade ago, they used to list the bottom 10 schools in terms of outcomes for TE results, which is just nonsense. That completely deprives the school environment in terms of the great learning that takes place within that particular cohort, but also what takes place in terms of pastoral care and individual development of those students within those school environments. It completely diminishes the role of the parent body, the community as a whole, to make sure that everything that possibly can be done for that school environment is done. It's based upon a raw, crude assessment of academic achievement based on the TE result. And you can never, ever compare a school, for example, in a remote areas of Western Australia with somewhere within the western suburbs and do so legitimately. It is beneath contempt that our media, as I said, almost salivate at the prospect of doing that on an annual basis. And that comes down to our NAPLAN testing. Our NAPLAN results have consistently improved, particularly over the 3 to 5 year and then 7 to 9 over the last 3 years. There have been significant improvements. In addition to that, there has been a 9% increase in ATAR students that have received 55. That is what is seen as the variable for entrance into university. There has been a 107% increase in VET take-up and graduation over that same time period. So statistically alone, to the West and the Sunday Times, eat that. You know, those results, why don't we see a bit of ink on that? Why don't we see some productive, positive reporting of results in Western Australia on that criteria? Don't wait until you get a negative story before you report it. Let's have a look at some good positive stories in terms of what's happening in education in Western Australia. And one of the greatest improvements in Western Australia over the last 3 years has been through Aboriginal education. We're dealing with Aboriginal people with one of the most marginalised groups in our community. They have unacceptably low literacy numeracy rates. They have appalling housing conditions in some instances, very, very poor health conditions in some instances, and very, very poor mental health facilities in some instances. As a community, as a society, as a state, as a nation, we've got to do more for these magnificent people, and we continue to do so. It's very difficult in Western Australia, given the fact that we have about 239 remote communities, and it's very, very difficult to provide quality education to a number of those students, to ensure that their retention at school is maintained, to ensure that their opportunities in school are exactly the same as their non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. As Minister for Indigenous Affairs, it's a portfolio that I fought for, spat the chewy eventually and got it. I love it. I can tell you it is a top priority for me that we do continue to show improvements in terms of literacy and numeracy rates for Aboriginal people, because one of the greatest barriers for Aboriginal people in terms of where they go and make a meaningful contribution, not just to the community but personally, is through improving educational outcomes, so that when they do reach secondary school, they do have reading and writing skills that are equal to their non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. So that, as I've said, is it's good. I'm delighted that we have seen significant improvement, but we've still got a way to go in that area. Another area I'd like to touch on, albeit briefly, is... how am I going, mate? Yeah. Cheers. Okay. Is one that I'm sure impacts on virtually every school community, and that is regard to behaviour management. Behaviour management is something that sort of as touched on constantly within our schools. Again, the media love to talk about certainly not just behaviour management in a general sense, but in terms of suspensions, in terms of whether or not students attend school on a regular basis, attendance numbers, and so on, and the drift to the private sector. Well, let me tell you right at the outset, that drift has actually been stemmed, and it is actually increasing. The numbers of students in our public education system is actually increasing, which is good. But across the whole gamut of behaviour management, it is a major issue. I'm very, very aware of the fact that on a daily basis, tens of thousands of students in our schools suffer in silence at the hands of bullying. Now, it comes through it's manifested in a much more sophisticated nature now than ever before. There's this misguided notion that bullying somehow is someone hitting someone in the shoulder or hitting someone in the head or pulling someone's hair, and that's bullying. And yes, that type of bullying is unacceptable, and that type of bullying is so transparently evident. But it is a much more subtle form of bullying. children in today's society become much more sophisticated, as I said, in terms of their capacity to bully their peers. Through the internet, through Facebook, through tweeting, through texting, through emails, okay, through students suffering in silence, through the cold shoulder treatment, all of these areas. And it transcends a whole raft of areas. Anything that they can be picked on in a lot of instances is fair game. You know, not through gender, through race, through homophobic bullying, a whole raft of areas you have whereby students, for some reason, take delight in making their peers feel diminished. Now, that manifests itself, and as I said, in a very generic concept of behaviour management, and it is absolutely essential that we continue to focus on it. Now, we as a government have been very, very proactive in that space. One of the major contributing factors to the independent public school system was to ensure that if schools did want to provide more opportunities in terms of behaviour management, they could do so through pastoral care, increased pastoral care. Again, that is not diminishing those non-IPS schools. We have continued to provide significantly more money and resources for enhanced behaviour management in our schools. For example, there was an additional $47 million for behaviour management and discipline strategy, which will be rolled out throughout our public education system over forward estimates. We also committed to an additional 60 school psychologists, of which we have delivered. Now, school psychologists play a pivotal role in terms of providing support and providing advice to students. But in some instances, they are just inappropriate in the eyes of some of our students. So we also provided another $10 million for the chaplaincy program. And the chaplaincy program is a terrific program. It really is. Chaplains play a wonderful role in our schools. It is a pastoral care role. It is a role where they can intimately talk with students, to the students in confidence, and provide support for students who feel the need. In addition to that, we provided an additional $3 million for our care schools. That's curriculum and re-education in education schools. Now, they are fundamentally funded by the federal government. The federal government reduced their funding. We increased that funding, and at the same time, we have used those care schools to provide an avenue for those students that are just not attuned to authoritarian schooling. And it'd be naive to assume that all students are. So about 97 of our students from the public education system are now engaged in the care school environment. And they are educational institutions which do fundamentally deal with the disengaged students. As I said, those students that simply are not attuned to authoritarian schooling. And with the raising of the school leaving age, you are going to have a proportion of students that are going to fall into that category. In addition to that, as a government, as I said, we are very, very aware of the fact that the job still hasn't been done, that we still continue to roll out policies that we already have that are implemented within our school environment to make sure that students, when they go to school, do feel safe, and also, as significant, that our teachers feel safe, that they do feel in an environment where they are supported from above, they are supported from the below, they do have the resources, the strategies, the expertise to deal with the manifest issues that exist within our community. As I said, teachers in contemporary society are much different to teachers from 10, 20 years ago. The chalk and talk days are long gone. Teachers in contemporary society not only have to be educators from an academic perspective, they have to be counsellors, they have to be support mechanisms, they have to be, in a number of instances, cooks. They have to be drive students here, there, and everywhere. The role of contemporary teachers in our public education system is much more significant than it ever was before in terms of the role that they play. So in order to make sure that we can ask them to effectively fulfil that role, we must provide them those resources. So as I've said, we've significantly increased the funding to our public schools for behaviour management. We've significantly increased school psychologists, significantly increased funding to the care schools and the chaplaincy program, and we also have the behaviour management centres. I've got to be honest with you, and I'll be perfectly frank here. For me personally, the jury's still out on the behaviour management centres. I want to make sure I want to be convinced that those behaviour management centres are the best use of government money, that money is most effectively going towards ensuring that behaviour management in our public education system is enhanced. The feedback that I've received over the last month or two is that, yes, they're working quite effectively, but it is a lot of money for a small group of students. I just want to make sure we are using that money effectively. Don't read into anything into that. I am not for a moment suggesting that I'm going to get rid of the behaviour management centres. If they're working effectively, so be it, but I just want to make sure that all of our schools are effectively resourced. So having said all of that, I think that just about covers the main issues. There are a number of others, of course. I could talk all day, I won't bother. I won't bore you. Having said that, I am very, very aware, and I mean this most sincerely again, of the role that you play within your school environment. Schools can simply not operate through teachers, administrators, students, buildings alone. Schools desperately need the support, the expertise, the experience, the enthusiasm of our parent bodies. Not just our parent bodies, but the community as a whole, so that the role that you play should never, ever be diminished in the eyes of the community and also in your eyes. Each day you go to the school, you should give yourselves a pat on the back, very aware of the fact that the school, the education system, the community as a whole is very appreciative of the contribution that you make. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you, certainly until March 9th, and I like to think in the 4 years beyond that. So thanks very much.
The questions will come up on the screen as well, so do you want me to hold them, or are you happy to read them from there?
I'm comfy, mate.
To read them from there? Are you happy to read them from there? Or do
you want me to read them?
Oh, I'll read them,
yeah,
but
okay.
if you want them in front of you, that's all.
No, I don't.
So we have received some questions for the Minister, and as is normal procedure, they will be displayed on the screen. So the first question is from WACSSO Primary School, and the question is, when will an additional school in the WACSSO area be built?
Well, I've got to look after WACSSO, I've got to tell you. The member for WACSSO is a mate of mine, so I've got to look after him in more ways than one. And from an educational perspective, look, the department constantly monitors student numbers, and as I understand it, the numbers in WACSSO have increased significantly from about 150 students from I've got to be honest, I had a brief read of these. I honestly didn't realise that questions were provided for me. I thought it was just a general go for it. But there are around 337 to 479, I think, in the last 3 years of WACSSO Primary School, which would suggest that there's a lot of pressure being placed on the infrastructure in that region. From my understanding of the briefing note, there is a facility down in WACSSO which does provide an opportunity for an additional primary school if and when it's needed. Certainly on those numbers alone, and when you go down to the WACSSO area, you realise that it's a vastly expansive area. I just know from a training perspective, the South West Institute of Technology has a campus down there, and I went down and had a look at a place with Troy and the local community in terms of expanding. There is a senior high school there. We're going to build, well, we are intending to build the training facility at that WACSSO centre, and I think, from memory, that is exactly where the facility for a potential primary school is. But having said all of that, I won't beat around the bush. Essentially, the government constantly, or the department constantly monitors student numbers. It is evident from those numbers, with a almost 150 student increase, that there will be a necessity for another primary school, and that will continue to be monitored by the department.
The next question is from Paul White, Mora Primary School, the Milling School campus. Why do annexed schools get funded properly the first year, then axed the following year? Is there a set funding policy in place, as for normal schools? Do we have to lobby every year for funding? Yeah, I guess, again, in that instance, when a school is annexed, it will be monitored, constantly monitored. So I understand in Milling that it was, they went from 37 to 17 over 2 years or 3 years. And in essence, what happened there is the 2 teachers will remain for 2013. There will be the non-teaching staff. There were 2 non-teaching staff that went above the quota, from my understanding. That will remain for 2013 and it will be monitored beyond that. But again, where you have a situation where a school is annexed to a host school, in this instance it was Mora Primary School, from memory, is that right? Mora Primary School. And that will continue to monitor that to ensure that they do have sufficient staffing, not just staffing but non-staffing support staff as well. But as the information that's been provided to me is that the current staffing will remain for 2013. If that's contrary to
whoever asked the question, by all means you can talk to me, I'll ring my office and I'll clarify it, but that's my understanding.
Thanks. The next question is from Beacon Primary School, from Tanya Gibson, and you did touch a bit on bullying and behaviour management in your presentation. The question is, bullying is an issue at our school. What new initiatives or programs is the state government introducing to combat this problem?
Behaviour management over... Yeah, I think I'll probably cover that. I'll just finish up by saying the $47 million is for the behaviour management and discipline strategy, which will enhance programs that already exist. It is one of the most significant issues in our education system. It really is, in terms of ensuring that our teachers and our schools are effectively resourced. But in addition to that, see, the issue with behaviour... I won't go on about it too much, but the issue with behaviour management has always been, not just... We're not talking about the most recalcitrant students, those that, that perhaps will end up in, being with the support of the care schools or with the behaviour management centres. We're talking about those issues that exist within the general school environment. Let's face it, if you go to work, anyone that goes to work and is faced with one conflict a day, if you have an argument with someone at work, you feel terrible. If you have one argument a week, you feel terrible. Well, a lot of our teachers will go to school and they'll have a dozen conflicts in a day. They'll get abused or something in a day. That's not reflecting negatively on our education system. I'm saying that situation does occur. Now, that's simply, to me, is unpalatable. It's unacceptable. And so I said we will do, that is why it has been such a priority for the government. For me, as a former educator and now education minister, it will continue to be a priority. That's why I said I'm going to look at the behaviour management centres, make sure that that is the best use of funding that's available, but also enhance that through other measures. Pastoral care is absolutely vital. The punitive action is fine, the big stick approach is fine, and it doesn't work. With all due respect, the pastoral care is much more significant than the punitive approach, and that is that's the philosophy that has been around in our schools for a number of years, and it certainly is something that is embraced by myself.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question is from Wickham Primary School, Randy Mulgard Angel. Information communication technology in our public schools is poorly funded, resourced and supported. Will the state government commit to increasing funding for ICT in public schools? And will they implement the proposed plan for every student to have access to an iPad on a 1-to-1 ratio basis?
You know what? Yeah, I'm not being flippant, I can tell you. I'd love to every student have an iPad, I really would. But you have this thing in government called Treasury, and whenever you go to Treasury, they tell you to get lost. No matter what you want, you go there and you bash your hand on the finger and they had to get lost. I've got I had training, workforce development, energy and Indigenous affairs. So I've done 3 rounds of budgeting, and I can't wait to go for the next. Well, hopefully get re-elected, but for education. And inevitably, the cupboard is bare with regard to funding. That's cold comfort to you sitting in front of me, as saying, well, you want your students, you want your children to actually be as best equipped as possible from an IT perspective to ensure that they can enhance their educational opportunities. Ultimately, we will get to a point, I can see, where every student will have an iPad. We've got to move down that way. I remember when we introduced laptops at Scotch. You want to try and introduce laptops to 180 13-year-old boys and see how many are still working after 1 week. It was an experience. Having said that, we did move down that path. It was very, very good, very, very good educational move. It was inevitably as a way of the future. There are 19 schools that are piloting iPads in a fashion. I've got to be honest with you, there is no funding at the moment to extend it beyond that. We will have a look at the pilot, we'll have a look at the effects, the impacts, but ultimately I can see a day when all students will have an iPad.
And the 5th question is from Serpentine Primary School, Leslie McDonald. And the question is, do you support the Gonski review, and will you be pushing for the recommended changes?
Yep, this is a big one, and I'll tell you, I was going to mention this, but I did actually see on the thing that it was one of the questions. Yeah, Gonski is a positive step forward. You're talking billions of dollars of investment into the public education system and identification of the fact that fundamentally our public education system across the nation needs to be better resourced. It's pointless, just pouring money into schools unless you've got the the criteria for improvement that's going to provide enhanced educational outcomes. Now, having said all of that, which is basically nothing, what we have to do as a state government is to wait, of course, until the federal government releases its response to Gonski. I will tell you, I have heard some murmurings that we're not going to do very well out of Gonski and Western Australia. A couple of issues. From our perspective, I have no problems whatsoever in having a look at a new funding model for public education, particularly in low socioeconomic areas. In Western Australia, we are a very disparate state geographically, so our responsibilities in Western Australia are much more profound than they are in particularly the Golden Triangle on the East Coast. And I'm not bashing up on them, I don't mind doing that, but I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is we have a special needs in Western Australia, not just in terms of the distance and the fact that you've got those unique challenges of small numbers in a number of schools, but also attracting teachers to those regions and also retaining teachers in those regions. Our demands in Western Australia are much more profound than they are in a number of the other states, and that needs to be considered. We always hear about how prosperous Western Australia is as an excuse for reducing our funding. I just had to fight the feds for $75 million of training. Can I assure you, if what I've heard is correct and we are actually not going to do well out of Gonski, I'm going to have my battles with the East, and I often do. We've got to get to the point where Gonski in itself, in terms of a very theoretical sense, is a message that we all need to hear. Gonski has provided an avenue for us to increase funding at the federal level. What we have to do now as a state government is wait for the federal government response. We will then respond accordingly. One thing I will say, however, is what happens in Canberra when, in terms of decision-making, regardless of the political persuasion, politicians go to Canberra and there's something in the water over there, they turn from federalist to centralist. And this is not a political statement, this is just fact. Right? And it says, my guys are exactly the same as the others. So what actually happens is they have a tendency to base their decision-making fundamentally on from a Canberra-centric perspective. Now, what we will be doing in Western Australia is to ensure that there are no strings attached to the Gonski recommendations which are going to adversely impact upon educational outcomes in Western Australia. Now, it sounds like alarmist mantra. It's not, guys. I can promise you, it is simply not. We had it in training. We've had the same thing in training, whereby we essentially were $75 million worse off as a direct result of strings that were attached to the new national partnership. Gonski is a unique opportunity for us as a nation to improve and enhance educational outcomes for all students within this nation of ours, and not to play politics. I promise you I will not play politics on this thing, but I will fight for funding for Western Australia, and I will not sign up to an agreement, neither will the Premier, if that is going to diminish our role in decisions that are made in our schools in Western Australia. So I think that just about covers it. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your very honest and frank account of education. And we do acknowledge that even though Peter's only been in the portfolio a short time, I think his passion is evident for education and coming from an education background, and as I said, our dealings with him previously in the Shadow Ministry. So we're very excited to have a new minister at the helm and a sense of renewed energy and some new possibilities on the horizon for students in Western Australia. And I guess the challenge collectively for us is to make sure we communicate them through to the government and directly through Peter as the minister. And certainly as your president, I look forward to doing that. And I would ask delegates to please thank Peter sincerely for his presence here and presentation today. What I would now like to ask you to all do, please, I have a little job for you, is while our lovely students are entering for their student performance, can you all please stand, have a little bit of a relax, have a bit of a wriggle around, shake your shoulders, and I'd like you to introduce yourself to at least 3 people that you haven't met before that are in close proximity to your table. Okay, thank you everybody. You all look like you've met more than 3, which is wonderful. I hope you just made a new friend and exchanged Facebook's accounts and whatever else you do. Give me your card and stop talking and sit down. It'd be good. Please. All right. So the wonderful students in the band are just about ready to start, but what we're going to do very quickly before then, if I can get your attention please. Thank you. Okay, we're just about to have our first draw of the weekend, and as those that have been to annual conference before are well aware, we have lots of goodies and prizes and spot draws, and I can hardly keep up, so lucky the staff have given me lots of notes on what to do. So we're going to do three spot draw prizes, and if you are a winner you need to go up to the operations desk. We do it based on the postcards that have been returned, so you should have put them in when you registered this morning, and once you are drawn your name does not go back in the box in terms of fairness. So I will ask my lovely barrel girl Jodie, oh, you going to draw them? Yes please, Jodie can draw and I shall read, and I hope I get your name pronounced correctly. Tanya Gibson from Beacon. First, if you can make your way to the operations desk to claim, please. Our next lucky winner, Ruth Johnston from Marangaroo. If you can make your way to the desk, please, Ruth. Right from the bottom. Oh, that's funny. Sorry, it only... I read it. I had to read it twice. I thought, is that correct? Not Jodie, but Jo Quinn from South Perth. Had to do a double take. If those 3 lucky people can make their way forward, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much, Jodie. Okay, moving right along. Next, one of our favourite parts of every weekend is the student performance. And today will be no exception. We have the Morley Senior High School Year 11 Classical Guitar Ensemble. This group was established 2 years ago when students first began instrumental lessons in Year 9. Since then, the group has learned an array of song repertoire ranging from classical, jazz, ragtime, Latin and traditional Irish and English tunes. The group has performed at primary schools, assemblies and functions within the school and has received much praise and good reviews from teachers and parents. The ensemble has quickly learnt an array of songs and is now tackling more in-depth guitar arrangements provided by the instrumental teacher Paul Johnson. Audiences will be delighted to hear a range of musical styles through 6-part arrangements for 10 guitars. Delegates, please join me in welcoming the Morley Senior High School Classical Guitar Ensemble. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much to the Morley Senior Guitar Ensemble and for Paul for bringing them along today, and for the students for giving up your Saturday morning. As a mother of teenagers, I'm well aware how valuable that sleep in and work time and all the rest of it is. So, and I'm sure for Charmaine and Jack and Lucy from Morley that are here with us this weekend, they very much enjoyed it, and I saw a lot of clapping and hip wiggling, and I'm sure people wish they could get up and have a bit of a dance. But we really do appreciate you coming out, and as parents we always really enjoy to see the students that we're working hard for, and you certainly do the public education system and your schools proud. Congratulations on your achievement. It was absolutely beautiful listening to you this morning, and thank you very much. Delegates, please show your thanks for all the students and the teacher today. We will now be breaking for morning tea. If I can please ask you to be back in here and seated ready to go for 11 a.m, that would be great, and we'll keep proceedings on track. So thank you again, and we'll see you all in half an hour.